Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzales, president of Trident Concepts, and I'm here with CCW Safe to talk about my new book, The Concealed Carry Manual. Today we're going to be talking about holsters. So, probably the second most important decision you make outside of the selection of the firearm that you're going to pick is going to be the holster. It is such an important consideration that you really want to kind of put some thought into the type of holster that you're going to use. And I will caveat this with be prepared to try 2 or 3 holsters before you find the one that's going to work well. One of the key things that I tell people is that the holster firearm selection combination needs to be comfortable when you're wearing it, and you need to be comfortable in it for extended periods of time. If it's not comfortable, it's going to lead to some unwanted behaviors, fidgeting, adjusting, checking, looking, all things that we don't want to do. So let's talk a little bit about holsters themselves. And the first thing that we talk about is you want to invest in a quality holster, and that investment needs to be considered from the perspective of, I want to be able to carry this holster for extended periods of time. So that means that I'm not going to say that you get what you pay for, but in a lot of cases you do. So an old friend of mine used to say, buy cheap, buy twice. So take that for what it's worth. So let's talk about locations on our body that we probably will see a holster being carried. The most common is going to be around the waistband. And you can carry a strong side, you can carry cross draw, you can carry appendix, you can carry small in the back. These are all different locations, and each of these locations has a slightly different holster design. So you're going to want to choose a location, and most of the time I recommend that you start with a strong side and work the strong side holster condition or location until you really feel comfortable with it. And then if you feel so inclined, start exploring some of the other ones. Just see the pros and cons, if you will. Be able to speak with authority about them. But other locations don't get a lot of attention, and I always try to encourage people to consider these other locations, such as ankle holsters and pocket holsters. They make up the rest of your holster locations. So when you have decided on a location on your body from which you're going to carry, the next thing we need to start talking about is what type of materials do I have to play with? And there's really only 2 types of materials. There's going to be Kydex, or the thermal molded plastic, and leather, either cowhide or horsehide. And again, the key thing here is knowing pros and cons. There's going to be pros and cons to leather, pros and cons to Kydex. And if you understand each of them in a little bit more depth, then you're going to be much better off choosing the one that fits your needs the best. The next thing we talk about is going to be, what are some of the features that I want to look for in the holster that's going to help me to do the job, or help the holster do the job better. And we break those features into 2 categories. Essential, meaning you have to have them. Enhancing, meaning kind of nice to have them. So let's talk about what are the essential features that I want. Well, the first thing is that I want the firearm to be retained by this holster. It has to fit and secure. And so that means that if it doesn't have good passive retention, meaning that it doesn't fit the gun correctly, or you're using a holster that's like one size fit all, probably not a good choice. The next thing that we want to talk about is that whichever holster that you choose, it must protect the trigger from coming into contact with something, anything really. If the firearm is in the holster, the trigger must be protected. So you have to make sure that the trigger guard area is completely covered. The third feature that I consider to be essential is that it must secure to my body. There are a lot of different attachment methods, and some are better than others. Some you give up security for concealment, and vice versa. You've just got to kind of play with this scenario until you find the right fit for your needs. The last one is that I want to be able to obtain a good firing grip with the firearm still in the holster. If the holster itself impedes my ability to get a firing grip, that's probably not, if any of these essential features are not found in a holster that you're looking at, you probably don't want to go with it. You probably want to consider something else. The next thing we talk about are what are some of the enhancing features? And there's a fair amount, but the two most common ones that we see are adjustable cant and adjustable retention. So what does that mean? Well, adjustable cant means that if straight drop or straight up and down, I could potentially get a slightly forward cant. Now, what's the advantage of a forward cant? What that does is that brings the butt of the magazine up. And when it brings it up, it blends it further against your body, so it helps to kind of like slice that profile of the magazine sticking out the backside a little bit more. You can have an adjustable cant with an extreme forward position, and that's something to keep in mind. 15 degrees would I be considered extreme, but what that means is that it really kind of contorts your hand to be able to get that grip, to be able to draw the gun. So again, nothing is free, pros and cons. The next one we talk about is the adjustable retention. And the adjustable retention means that it will tighten or loosen its grip on the gun. One of the things that I tell people is that if you chose your holster well from the beginning, the retention that it has, like out of the box, should be sufficient. You shouldn't have to necessarily adjust it to be tighter. So you have to be careful about that. Try not to go to the extreme of really tightening it or really loosening it. One of the things that I talk about is that all the hardware on your holster is susceptible to kind of like wear and tear. And in specific, what I mean by that is like after a while, the screws become loose. You might lose a couple, so be mindful of that. Keep an eye on them. Make sure that you occasionally just make sure they're tight and present. Sometimes they fall out without you even knowing it. The last thing I really encourage you to do is dry fire practice with your holster firearm combination. Make sure that you've unloaded your firearm, make sure that it's in a safe condition, and kind of dry fire practice before you actually go out to the range and do anything live. Put a lot of time and energy into that. Really rack up some dry fire time. That's going to help kind of like get around some of the oddities of the holster, the newness of the holster, and get a little bit more familiar with the holster so that when you actually go out to the range to do your live fire work, you're a little bit better prepared and safer. All right, if you got questions on the book, you can easily find more answers by going to concealedcarrymanual.com. That's where you can order it. And then, of course, if you have questions that you would like to post down below, feel free. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzales. Take care and stay safe.